All right, so we'll go ahead and get started with our work session tonight to do with the discussion item, which is the review of the 2008 to the 2028 Comprehensive Plan Amendments. So with that said, I know that y'all have been getting some comments and feedback because I've been reading everything. Probably have been incorporating and editing, and so this is the draft.
That's correct. I have a few slides that I could show just to start off the presentation tonight.
All right, Dan, that'd be good. I was kind of hoping you'd get that ball rolling here.
All right, so this is the second draft of the comprehensive plan. This has not changed since this was distributed to you 1 month ago on the 16th of March. The following slides are based on the list of changes that was sent out in that second draft, and I'll just go over them for the benefit of the audience. This slide you've seen before. It's the draft goals. They have not changed since when we first adopted them. Beginning with some general changes, we've updated the headers for all chapters. We've corrected a bunch of page number footers for all chapters. We've simplified several chapter and subsection titles to make them a little bit less verbose. We've removed the table of contents pages for individual chapters, so there's only one table of contents in the beginning. We've removed Chapter 9, which is the Work Program and Amendments section, and there's been a number of minor rewordings and formatting changes to try and make paragraphs fit a little better within the document. So for the introduction, there's been a bunch of changes that were basically left out of the first draft as we were moving forward, beginning with an updated cover and title page. The forward section has been rewritten and significantly shortened. We've updated the acknowledgments page, and we've also added the Parks and Rec Advisory Board to that page, considering their help in writing the Community Services chapter. We've updated the table contents with our current chapters and page numbers. We've removed the lists of tables, figures, and maps. We've removed a list of outdated studies in the information section, in the introduction section. And we've updated the introduction, the last section of introduction section, with basically the timeline of what's happened with the comp plan these past few months with our review. However, it still does need recommendation and adoption dates for when it is adopted by City Council. Moving on to the housing chapter, we've added a description of existing mobile home parks within the current state of Poquoson's housing chapter. We've updated the goals, objectives, and strategies, which was skipped during the first draft. As we've done in previous chapters, we've consolidated the goals into one paragraph, and we've added the strategies as we described them into the chapter text. And we've also done a few minor rewordings and removal of redundant objectives. For the economics chapter, we've corrected a description of Victory Boulevard. We've added in summaries of several relevant write-in questions within the citizen comments section, and we've changed strategy number 1 to recommend uses that are more in character with citizen comments and development expectations. I think that was to do with waterfront development and uses for that. The environmental management chapter, we've added a demand for shoreline access section based on citizen survey responses, and thanks to Board Member Travis for helping us out with that. For the community services chapter, we've updated the school consolidation section and removed the suggestion that it be used for city offices. And we've removed the recommendation that city offices be consolidated together. For infrastructure, we've included up-to-date information on storage tanks and storage tank emissions provided from the Department of Environmental Quality. And we've also softened language that recommended the extension of HRT service to the city of Poquoson. And finally, for land use, we've reworked the description of village commercial to be a bit more general. We've added correct descriptions of the city architectural control district and its location. And we've included more general addresses and tax map numbers for specific commercial properties, such as the Crab Cake House and Sheffield's Market. So that's the summary of the changes that were incorporated since the first draft. They are all in the second draft in front of you. There are 2 copies of that second draft on the table now, in addition to what I sent out previously. You may be interested as well that we also have in the back of those two copies preliminary versions of the new future land use and zoning maps for the city. And those we prepared these past few weeks. We've made a few changes based on the rezonings that have happened in the city in the last couple of years, and we've added a little bit nicer format to it to make it printer friendly.
Thank you, Dana. Anybody have any questions of Dana right off the bat, or right in and start discussing here? Hi, Libby. Good to see you.
Sorry, I'm late.
No, you're fine. Thank you.
Well, I guess I can start since I've been absent in action the last month, and I have been following the recordings when it was audible. So it sounds like we've had a really productive month. I just want to say off the bat, Dan, and you nailed it. I was just so delighted to read this document. It's clean. It flows from chapter to chapter. I think when we started out on this mission almost 2 years ago, we didn't have a street map to work from. And so I know we struggled with how we were going to accomplish this goal. And I'm just thrilled actually sitting here today saying, wow, we're almost there. And your editing has been really on point. So thank you. I did take the liberty of today forwarding an annotated version of I didn't consolidate my comments, but if it's appropriate, I'd like to just maybe highlight a couple of things because I don't want to hog the whole time. One area that I believe is missing is some sort of vision, an updated vision. I think Bill and I mentioned that in one of your comments. And I would like to throw something out. Usually this is a little bit before the horse. I mean, we've already developed the strategies. Usually a vision comes first. But this is where we are at this point. I'd like to maybe emphasize the uniqueness of Poquoson. When we compare ourselves to other localities, we have a lot of that really only pertain to our city, beside the fact of the incredible shoreline we have to administer and what that means for city government and for planning purposes, but also, the schools character, friendliness, I think, came up one of the points where what makes the small town atmosphere. So I thought maybe uniqueness could be something to grab upon, and perhaps as we introduce ideas for implementation, that might be something to give a little bit more emphasis to what we're doing. Quick question, and maybe this might be one more for Wally. The voting district versus planning districts. I detected a slight difference between the preamble and what was mentioned. Are these the same or different? I could. There was a little contradiction there, and I wasn't quite sure.
I haven't studied the maps exactly, but I believe they are very similar. There's a slight difference, I think, mostly with regards to the boundary between the central and the eastern districts. I think one is slightly larger, but in a general sense, they're basically the same.
Yeah. Well, I would like to maybe suggest perhaps a revision so that they are the same. Where I'm going with this is that it then provides the citizens in that district some sort of accountability back if they have an issue. Does that make sense? I don't think topography necessarily is a barrier in our city like maybe in other jurisdictions. So do voting districts change? I don't know. I mean,
I'm not sure, but if they haven't changed, then what you've suggested certainly would be possible, because in our odyssey to kind of redevelop our GIS system, I found a number of older shapefiles. We do have shapefiles for the voting districts, but I cannot find planning district shapefiles for the life of me. So if they have not changed, it would be very easy to create a planning districts map based upon the voting districts.
And maybe that might make your jobs more simple. Okay. All right, so that was just a question. I'm really delighted to see the section in Chapter 7 on infrastructure for an infrastructure improvement plan. I think that is really long overdue, and it was wonderful to read the elements of that infrastructure plan. The fact that we're incorporating quite a number of different elements in that. I think there's a lot of, particularly in infrastructure updates, with citizens. It was really nice, since I'm in the Eastern District, to see that pipes, water suppression and fire protection. That was really nice to see. I was a little confused in what was in Chapter 7 concerning the piping and sidewalks improvements on Yorktown Road versus what I heard the city present concerning the piping work on Little Florida Road, saying that sidewalks are not possible in that environment. Is that because we have more right-of-way on Yorktown Road, or is this still a wish and a goal to incorporate piping with sidewalks?
Well, as is the case with a lot of this plan, a lot of the existing language was kept, so that might have been a holdover from previous chapters. And of course, this was not written, this was written prior to the current sidewalk plans, which are now being developed by our engineering department. So things may have changed in the past few months. I can definitely verify that with the city engineer to see if it is possible to change that language to better reflect the conditions for.
If I may, I think, excuse me, pollen season. Part of what the engineer said, I kind of wrote out and rode down the road, and I can understand it. It seems to me that some places, and Little Florida is a good example, where the road is considerably higher than the ditch, which is considerably higher than people's yards. And what I was understanding to say is if we tried to pipe and cover over these things, all we're going to do is flood people's yards. Or have to come up with some way to raise the yards. Now, I'm no engineer, so I don't know how you resolve that, but I think that is an issue.
So it was a site-specific concern about accommodating.
Well, that was a comment
Yeah.
that he made about that problem along that area, and I said I just kind of rode down Little Florida one time to take a look at it. I said, gee, I think I see what he's talking about. And I didn't, look at any addresses or anything like that. It's just a general idea. Not being an engineer or a structure guy, I have no idea what you do about that, but I can see the problem, because right now the roads drain into the ditch. If you cover the ditch, the road's going to have to drain somewhere else.
And the improvements that were just completed on the corner of Fast Street and Little Florida, they've actually got like washout panels that are coming in to absorb if there's any extra capacity that the pipe needs, it has a place to go. But I was just curious, I was delighted to see sidewalks included in Yorktown Road, and I just wanted to be sure that that's feasible. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be a right-of-way issue?
It is, in addition to what Mr. Travis mentioned, the fact that we have very narrow right-of-ways in the city that kind of precludes us being able to put down sidewalks by right is probably the big problem that I've heard repeated to me.
I would say on Yorktown Road, that's probably the issue, also piping in ditches.
See, that's why I'm asking, yeah, because it was definite strategy under Chapter 7-13. I'm going to back up and look at Chapter 4 economics. I was wondering if we should also include e-commerce as another potential opportunity and impact to our retail. A lot of studies right now to the Amazons of the world and their impact on retail commerce, and with us, just putting all our eggs into brick and mortar retail establishments, maybe we need to also include looking at e-commerce, particularly the home-based town, and sort of capturing some of that opportunity. I got my being a bonnet over sidewalks, so I'm going to continue on with my line of thinking on the idea of a linear park, bikeways and trails. Beware, I've had a lot of travel in the last month, and I've seen a lot of wonderful examples in other localities whereby bikeways and sidewalks don't necessarily traverse roadways, that they actually meander through neighborhoods. And I would really like perhaps for us to be considering a different system aside from just using right-of-way, connecting neighborhoods and away from dangerous roads. We talked about upland wetlands and the ability to develop those basically wastelands to a developer, and seeing if there's some sort of contiguous wetlands within the city, perhaps in the Western District, that somehow could be connected, so that we are providing another method of sidewalks and bike trails and hiking trails aside from just the traditional right-of-way beside a roadway. And also, with a parkland is very expensive. If we start looking at acquiring property in the Western District that's currently zoned residential, that's a huge, I think it's a huge expense for the city to take unless it's a donated piece of property. I have a question concerning resource conservation areas in section 8-19. If a piece of private property has been designated under resource conservation, which can a private owner change that once it's been designated?
Resource protection area, it is what it is, whether it's on property or not. That's not going to change.
So if I, as a private property owner, decide to put a conservation easement on the front of my property, is that into perpetuity?
Yes.
Okay, and that goes with the sale of the property?
Yes.
Okay. So what happens if I die and my heirs then inherit my property? Can they claw back that conservation easement?
I'm not aware that they can. Everything is mentioned, as you said, in perpetuity. Perpetuity is about as close as
Right.
you can get to forever.
Right.
So no, that would run with the land. I mean, essentially what's happened is that property owner is sold part of their bundle of property owner rights, or sticks, it's called. And once those are sold, you've been reimbursed for that. So
Resource conservation goes to a different use outside the personal property owner.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know in Middlesex, in the county, we would see people that would sell hundreds of acres of this, and essentially they give up their rights to do things like subdivide or build more than one or two houses on them. So yeah, and each one's a little bit different. It would depend on the language of the particular agreement, but you are getting reimbursed.
Okay. That's a question. This is a holdback from our discussion about chickens and farm animals. I was surprised to learn that we still have 2 functioning farm properties in the city, actually off With Creek Road, and they're contiguous to each other. I would like to suggest that the possibility of reinstating an agricultural zone. And the reason for my recommendation is that here in the TMDL, both of those properties front onto Back River, and I'm not sure if that could be another way for us to mitigation points. I've spoken to, well, actually, she's now deceased, who was the prior owner of farm property, and she was very proud of the fact that it was a heritage farm. It had actually been in her family for over 100 years. And when the city rezoned, probably in the 80s, the agriculture designation went away. And so properties within rezoned residential. So we saw a lot of flipping of agricultural lands to residential neighborhoods and subdivisions. So I'm just throwing that out as another way to perhaps look at those green spaces that came up in the citizen comment area, supporting viable business operations that happen to be of a farming nature in the city. We've got a very exciting farm. Suddenly there's an interest in farming for some reason. I think it would be really cool that we have, again, back to that, using that uniqueness of our city to maybe have that as a consideration. And I'll just throw that out.
I read what you said, and I don't know enough about it. I got to scratch my head because I don't know much about agricultural district, but I'm just wondering, other than the possible TMDL, what is the upside of that, other than perhaps telling the people who own those farms that we're going to restrict what you can do with them in the future if you don't want to be a farmer any longer? And I don't have any idea if that's what that would be.
The real concern from Ms. Markham when I met with her over the farm ordinance is the incredible taxes that those properties have to pay on an annual basis. They're actually assessed according to the residential lots that could potentially, their farms could be divided. So if they didn't have an outside income, they would have been unable to sustain the taxes on those properties. So Benji Han is another example where he's outside employed, but if we change the nation, perhaps their heirs would be able to afford farming with taxes. I'm just...
You would have to do that under a land use program.
Yeah.
And administer it. It has a lot of criteria. Of course, you can set it however you want, but that's been the issue when large farms were zoned to residential and they shut up per acre. I know personally where I live on a farm, it's not a working farm, but once the development went in front of us to create a 50-foot right-of-way, our assessment went up 65%.
Right, and that's to the point, Libby. That I think we're at a point in our maturity as a city that if we are to somehow, accommodate all commercial uses, I think farm use is as we have done with the Waterman businesses, to try and improve water quality to support those businesses down on Messick, that it's going to be a now or never, because those farms definitely, I know there's a new subdivision planned off of Worth Creek that's going to be off of the Brick House Road area. So I can just see the march for more.
I mean, you get to the point, you get to the point where, you got 20 acres and it's being assessed at $100,000 an acre.
Right.
You're talking about $2 million. Well, if you can't pay those kind of taxes unless you're independently wealthy. Yeah. And as young people come along, just like in Phoebe's place, I knew, I've known that family for years. Right. And as that property passes to the heirs, they can't afford those kind of taxes on it. So as much as they would not want to sell it, the hand's forced to do it, unless you have a land use program in effect, and,
It would require an additional zoning. It would be a statement of an original zoning.
Well, it would be a land use, it could still have the residential zoning, but it would be a land use program that would be instituted whereby the criteria was set. I know, Wally, you probably, I think they
Yeah.
have that
For
in Middlesex
Middlesex, yeah.
County.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
that would be something that I know Benji has spoken to me about on more than one occasion. I mean, I don't know. There are a lot of tracts of land in Poquoson. You know, you have forestry land use, you
Right.
have open space, you have agriculture, you have a variety, so.
As I understand it in general, you have to have, not including the residential area, you have to have at least 5 acres of property. So, and those are just basic commissioner revenue.
Yeah, of course.
Uh,
Have a
But
revenue
that is
impact.
sort of the basis of land use, and different criteria of what kind of land uses. A working farm, you have to be able to demonstrate that in terms of
the
receipts per
income
year.
from it.
Right. And, you know, I don't know, I confess to not being as familiar with the agricultural area here as, or part being used as farms as I could be. You know, I don't know. Those are things maybe to think about, but,
I would certainly say for the purposes of the comp plan, the most we would want to do is say something like investigate the possibility or
I think
explore the
investigate,
possibility. I don't think we want to go
explore,
any
yes.
further than that
No.
at this point in time. Now,
Right.
that may be, it may make sense
Yeah.
to add something in there that says explore that possibility.
I would
We
agree
come
with
under
that.
Yeah,
land
we
use,
can
yeah.
get bogged down in the details.
Because if you do
which wouldn't
investigate,
be-
explore, it seems like to me, between that step and actually doing something, there's going to have some sort of study, there's going to have to be a period of data collection and analyzing before. But I think explore is
It would
good
be
way
a
of putting it.
significant impact on tax revenue, I can tell you.
Oh, I'm sure it would. I'm
Yeah, we
sure
know
it
that.
would.
Yeah.
And that may be,
That may be
that
what
may
stops.
be a big, you know.
That's why I'm
strike
mentioning it
against
now,
so.
because it's either going to be now or never. And, you know, with the exciting new projects coming online, there might be a, you know,
I think you're right, yeah, it would be a
So-
big impact.
Yeah, I really appreciate your comments. I think you have some great inputs there, Lee. And again, Dan, and thank you so much. I think that a lot of what's in the current comp plan, it's really been freshened up, forward thinking, you know, looking at the future. I really like your input, Lee, the vision and, you know, the uniqueness of, and so many people indicated that that was of tremendous value of them, having uniqueness and friendliness in the small town atmosphere. So I think that's really good. We had similar, I think, probably feedback about incorporating, and I know that all this was written, but a lot has been done in the last few months about the sidewalks connecting the schools, so it sounds like that's going to be implemented. The inclusion of piping ditches, you know, pending the CIP approval, and maybe that, I know we'll have more CIP discussion this evening, so that could be implemented. Two just general comments that I had. One comment is, as far as the strategies and goals and objectives, you know, I hate to have strategies in there if we're not actively planning and trying to do our best to at least attempt to follow through with those and maybe have some sort of accountability. I don't know if there was in the past any accountability with the strategies and objectives and goals. It would be great to have just maybe like an annual update on here's where we stand, here are goals that we've met, here's how we're trying to plan for those, kind of be proactive to meet some of those goals. And then the other general comment that I have is there is a lot of verbiage about the fountains of Poquoson throughout the document, and I don't know the status of that. I know that the upcoming phases of that, at least from my outside looking in, it looks like that's been stalled for a little bit. I don't know if there was a timeline on some of those conditional use permits. I know that there was an extension granted. I don't know how much time they have to follow through. I don't know how much do we want to pull back some of our verbiage about the population, or the demographics that would contribute, or the housing, or the commercial, village commercial district, that would be contributing to the city without knowing for sure their plans forward, or if we want to go ahead and keep it in, knowing that it's maybe possibly stalled. So that's just kind of a general comment about putting in, kind of strong language, putting in that this is a development that's planned. And I don't know how viable it is or what the status is, but that's just a general comment too. That's all I have.
I had made just a couple, I included most of you on some of my comments. Most of them are editorial. I'm not going to go through them again here because they're just basically small, minor editorial suggestions. A couple that I would just bring up, although I did mention before, and I think it's important to get on the record. In Chapter 2, Table 210, we still use estimated school enrollment figures for 2010 and 2015 when I know the school division has produced actual figures. I realize that's a different source of data than everything else in the plan. But it seems to me that it would make sense to use actual figures. I mean, they have to send to the state for their funding, and maybe estimated figures beyond that. That's just something I think would clean up a question mark. There are a couple places in here, which a couple mentioned, that I know the last minute changes, but like in Table 4-1, Farm Fresh does no longer exist in the next, for 28 days. Poquoson Pharmacy no longer exists. There's no such thing as a crab cake house. My neighbors have only been there 18 months. They have no idea what I'm talking about when I say B.C. Smith's. And actually, somebody said Mama Mia's, but Mama Mia's is only one of the properties in the building that we talk about. I don't know if they have official names or not. I really don't know, but those are kind of old. Well, they're things we're all used to thinking of. People who lived in the city for a long time. I always called it B.C. Smith's, but then I went there when it was a hardware store. But I know what it is. It's really kind of small stuff. It's really not important. But I just thought it'd be nice to maybe get it. School consolidation, I believe, has been resolved. We may not like it, but I think it's been resolved. And I really like the idea, as you mentioned earlier, about having a master plan in the city. Maybe it's beyond the scope of the comp plan, but I sure would like to see who's in charge of making that happen. It's one of those ideas that I hate to see. We all walk out the door saying that's a great idea, and we get together in 15 months from now saying that was a great idea and nothing's happened. Now, I don't know who does it. Maybe that's something big enough that it has to be contracted out. I'm not sure we have a large enough staff here to do it, but that's something that we might want to consider at some point in time. I think it's a great idea, including sidewalks.
I can speak to that you and Angie had mentioned. You may have noticed in the slides that it mentioned the removal of a Chapter 9, which was a work program chapter. This big blue thing that I have in front of me is a copy of the second draft that was looked at by the city manager, who sat down with us last week and made a couple of comments, most of which is minor, just kind of fixing language and stuff. But the big comment he made was that there should be a work program at the end of this document that would have actionable items that can be accomplished by city staff that would be there and have a kind of a time frame and a designation of who would be responsible to achieve that. And I know the infrastructure master plan that is mentioned a number of times in this was specifically mentioned as something that would be put in that plan. The existing comp plan had something like that somewhere in the back, and I think the big thing moving forward to a final draft would be reincorporating that and undeleting it and basically bringing it back and updating it with specific strategies that are in the current plan that we can act upon.
I think that I agree with that. I do recall some years ago, every once in a while at a meeting, someone would kind of come in and update us on that chapter, where things were, what was moving along, what was being done, what wasn't being done. Just I think that's a good idea.
Right, and that'll give us the capacity to do that again.
That really addresses what a couple of us mentioned.
Yeah. So who would do that again? Who would do the work?
Well, I'd just be
Staff.
basically taking the old plan, looking at it, and then re-adding strategies that are in this document right now. And then I guess it could be updated in the future if we come up with new strategies.
Maybe a portion of them as short-term, mid-term, and long-term.
You're
items.
talking
to-
about an
to-
implementation plan. Am I
Basically-
on the
basically,
same page?
yeah.
Work plan, implementation
An
plan. Yeah,
implementation
we're talking.
plan, right.
It's a staff function, is it not?
It could be a staff function, it could also be a consultant function if staff doesn't have enough, time or whatever assets to point to it. We'd like to do everything we can, obviously in-house, but remains to be seen. We'll putting that together though, and basically we're going to take the strategies or the objectives that are most directory in nature. There's some that are fairly general, and there's some that really do point a finger. So we're going to try to identify where their finger's pointing to and what needs to be undertaken, and a general time frame.
Go ahead, other than, I said, small things I said that were just really minimal stuff.
No, I'm just listening right now.
Because I don't have too many comments, except that when we get this wrapped up and get it to council and they work on it for as long as they do, and they finally vote on it, the very next week after they vote on it, some of it in there will not be approved. So it's with life changes, not being able to predict, we will come as close to, I wouldn't say perfection, but reach that, but we will come as close as we can to a very good document, which I think my compliment go to the planning staff, and particularly Dan. Excellent job on editing, because we wanted to streamline this. One of our goals, because a lot of it we felt at the beginning were things that could be eliminated and it wouldn't be so lengthy, and I think it's been done. And I think the points tonight are well taken, but it's important to realize again the purpose of this document. I will reiterate that we can't be but so detailed. It's a detailed document, but yet it isn't. Broad document, it gives a broad view, and we can't put everything in it, because if we did, we would have something that would be more cumbersome and huge. But this is I think it's a well-worked document, and my compliments also to the team that did the 2-year work.
Yeah, really.
Headed by Lee
agree.
and Bill, so I will compliment them. The project has been lengthy, but I think we are coming to the end of the road here. And we'll have another update, accomplished, ready to go to council.
As you said, it's going to be ever-changing, and as ordinances are changed and voted on, will there be amendments to the document that will be attached that basically will update it, as you say, because as soon as you pass it changes.
Absolutely.
It just changes, yeah. You just can't anticipate. We wouldn't have anticipated the farm fresh would be closing.
Right.
I mean, where we put it in here.
Right.
But there you go.
Just a curiosity point, and I've been wrestling with this for a couple of weeks. I don't have a thought. Well, I don't have a thought. I did watch the combined meeting, the work session with the city council. And I know the mayor said they'd like to do a work session between us and the city council before it's turned over to them, I guess, as a final document. And I guess I've been wondering if I understood that correctly. There's two approaches, and I don't know which is the approach to take. Should we have a public meeting, get public comments, and then go into the work session so we can share anything we might get from the public, although we certainly don't seem to get very much? Or should we meet with them and get their feelings and then come back and make any adjustments we make after? I really don't know. I have no idea. I'm not looking for an answer now, but I wrestle. I don't know which is the best approach, because I would like to get it off our plate.
Yes. And when we have it on our agenda and we'll have a public hearing, we'll get public comment. I don't know how the progression there would be. I don't know what.
I Don't know.
Yeah.
Could go either way, and there's pluses and
question.
minuses to both
Right.
directions. And they may have a preference. They may have a preference, I don't know.
Yeah.
What I got out of the work session, and is, it seemed like to me, they may want the planning commission to take a look at it in the public hearing, and then before, in that period of time, from where the planning commission's made its recommendation and to when the city council looks at it, that's when they would like to have the joint work
That is
session.
certainly a very logical approach.
That
It-
seems-
It makes
yeah.
sense to me, because that way council can see what feedback we had gotten. Of course, it does not allow us to make adjustments before our public hearing from, we might get from council, but that's, either one.
That's
There's a
okay.
plus or minus, it's either one. I'm fine with it. As I walk around the morning, I say, geez, I wonder which way we should go.
That seems about the way it'll.
Fortunately, I don't have to make a choice.
Yeah, no, I think that.
For me.
is a lot what they intended.
Right, and one of the things that the city council said too, and I believe I'm right about this, Bonnie, Ms. Shriver, correct me if I'm wrong, is that they didn't want to be hearing the comprehensive plan in the middle of summer when
Yeah, I saw
people were
that.
going to be out of town. So, I mean, if you start doing the math, if you looked at this at a public hearing, let's just say as soon as May, allowing for the joint work session, it may be September or October before we actually get a final
That
sewer
is
count
certainly right, and I
dispensation
did
on
see
this.
that, and I decided, well, okay, what they say makes sense, but that should not drive us, because we can give it to council, and they can put it on their agenda whenever they want.
Right.
I mean, it's not like if we give it to council on the 1st of June, they're not required to hear it in June, they can put it on the agenda anytime they want.
Do it in December.
But I agree with you, I did understand that, and I understand what he said, because we were working with the participation team. We found things really slowed down this summer.
Well, I'll just say thank you for your praise, and thank you for actually taking the time to make comments and to read through this document, because I think it was a very significant part in fixing it up, is just having sets of eyes looking at the whole thing and reading it through and picking out things that didn't make sense or were incorrect. But it shouldn't take me long. I have all the comments that you've made. It shouldn't take me long to incorporate them to bring back that work program chapter. So I think the final question is, when would you like to consider this for public hearing?
You mentioned May, if you think that's feasible.
I don't think it would take that long to do this. So yes, I think we could definitely look at it in May.
All right.
Works for me. Yeah, like I said, that helps, it doesn't get it off our plate, but it helps us get it, we're ready to get over to council, so
Ready, yeah.
if everybody can do it for May, I can go for May.
I'm good.
I think also, to maybe try and maximize advertisement too, not just the daily press. No one reads the daily press. I'm sorry, I do. My husband and I think we did too. But, we've got an active social media presence with Facebook and whatever, and I know when we did the CPT that just having announcements, not a discussion, but certainly, as broad advertisement as possible and multiple medias, I think. Because I think there's people who took the time to fill out the surveys may be wanting to be very interested as to where we are right now.
I think that's a great point. And also, everyone who did take the time to fill out this survey, it was Poquoson, we want to hear from you, we want to hear from you, and we kept saying that. So it would be nice to allow them to have some closure and still participate. I think that's.
Works for me. I guess we go on next. But I certainly encourage, I think both of you are involved, for instance, in Kiwanis, there's, 150 members there?
Oh, yeah.
Just a couple announcements in places like that. If you, but it's some people.
I know. We want young people too.
Yeah, okay. You want the younger crowd, I understand. I know.
The break, we'll
Reconvene.
convene.
While I